Have you ever wondered what those news channels mean when they say the rupee just became stronger or the yuan just became weaker? What does this even mean? How do you measure the strength of a currency? In this video, you are going to understand this very fundamental economic concept. Hi friends, welcome to Econverse. I'm Abrar and I'm a fellow student who topped in my GCSE Economics last year in Oman. On this channel, we make learning economics simpler, clearer, and hopefully a lot more fun. In this video, we are going to be looking at exchange rates. So let's get straight into it. Alright, so in this video, we are going to be looking at exchange rates. Now, exchange rates is the fundamental system that determines the level of international trade in an economy. So the exchange rate, before we begin, I think it's critical that we understand two key definitions. So let us look at them. So let me just expand on that. Firstly, the definition of an exchange rate. So an exchange rate is essentially the rate at which one country's currency is exchanged for another country's currency. So in the case of one currency, you can take something like your US dollar and you can compare it to another currency, let's say Indian rupee. So when you do this conversion, you essentially get the price of one currency in terms of another. So if I were to quickly just search it up as of 13th of June, let's say now what it shows me is 1 US dollar equals 95.11 Indian rupee. Now let us look at another key definition, the foreign exchange rate index. The price of one country's currency in terms of a basket of other currencies that are weighted according to their importance in the country's international transactions. Now, what does this whole last part of the phrase of the definition even mean? So it basically means, let's say you take India, you look at their 5 or 4 key trading partners, and those would have more weights, like more weightage in the whole foreign exchange rate index in comparison to other countries. So basically, whichever countries trade with you the most, they are weighted higher in the foreign exchange rate index. So now that we've looked at the key definition, some of the key definitions, let's dive straight into the main concept. So the foreign exchange rate. The foreign exchange rate is managed through 3 main systems. Firstly, you have 3 main methods. So firstly, you have a fixed exchange rate system, a fixed exchange rate. Then you have something called a floating exchange rate. And lastly, you have something that delves into both of them and has a managed floating exchange rate. So these are the 3 main ways through which exchange rates are managed. So now let's delve deep into each one of them. So the first one, the fixed exchange rate, is wherein one is one whose value is fixed against the value of another currency, and this is essentially maintained by the central bank. So it's always pegged to another currency, as they say it in economic terms. Now, what does this basically mean? In real world scenarios, many countries' currencies are pegged to the US dollar. So this basically ensures that there is stability in your exchange rate and it doesn't really fluctuate. Now let us look at what the other ones mean. So the floating exchange rate is basically one which is completely determined by market forces. Now what do I mean by market forces? Now in the case of exchange rates, I think it's key if we try and look at this through one key example. Let's just try and understand it through this lens. This is how I view it. I want you to try and think of 3 circles. Let's just consider the center circle as the market for exchange rates, which is what you call forex, your foreign exchange rate market. Then you have on this side, let's say you have India, and on this side you have US. Now just for example, I'm just saying, let's just say the US demand has risen for Indian exports. So essentially how this whole exchange rate thing works is the US has to go on to buy rupee from the forex market by giving dollars. So they give their dollars for rupees, if that makes sense. So in this case, how this transaction works is, from this side you get USD, from this side you get INR, and this INR travels to the US, which allows them to buy the imports. So this is a basic sort of overview understanding of how the whole exchange rate system works. So in this case of floating exchange rates, you're allowing the entire system to operate through the demand and supply of foreign currencies. Now let us look at the last one and what it means. So this is basically when the central bank fixes a certain band within which a currency is determined by market forces, let's just say. So the central bank essentially fixes a band. Now this is a very key word here, a band. A band is basically, in this case, sort of a limit within which the market forces completely determine the exchange rate. But the moment it exceeds this band, the government, the central bank, would intervene in order to fix the exchange rate. So it is sort of a merge of both of these systems. That is how you can look at this particular system. So it merges both of these systems to bring together one system. Now I have a couple of key acronyms that I use to remember how each system works. Now for the fixed exchange rate system, I use an acronym called the RIDE. And to remember the floating system, I use AID. Now let me quickly explain what each of these stand for and how this would help you when it comes to exams. Now let's begin with AID, because that is probably easier for you to understand. So appreciation increases imports. So that's what A and I stand for. Appreciation of a currency increases increases imports, and depreciation increases exports. So in both cases you're seeing increasing. So let me just quickly try and explain that using one acronym that you must be familiar by now. Have you ever heard of SPICED? I'm sure you have. Stronger pound, imports cheaper, exports dearer. So essentially, when you're appreciating your currency, your imports are cheaper, so thus appreciation leads to increased imports. At the same time, when your currency becomes weaker, WPIDEC, that's how I remember it, you could also do that. So weaker pound, imports dearer, exports cheaper. Exports become cheaper, so you increase your exports. So you use this key acronym to make sense of aid. And lastly, let's look at RIDE. RIDE is essentially the exact same system. However, instead of A, you have R. R stands for revaluation in this case, because rather than the previous one, where the market forces determine whether a currency appreciates or depreciates, in this case, the central bank can decide to revaluate or devaluate a currency. So revaluation increases imports and devaluation increases exports. I hope that makes sense. This is the only way through which I have remembered and understood this entire concept. I hope that helps. Now let's just quickly analyze the advantages and disadvantages of the fixed and floating systems to get a better idea. So let's begin with the fixed system. Fixed exchange rates. For the fixed exchange rate system, some of the advantages are, firstly, it encourages investors and builds trust. This is because there is a stability in the price of the currency, and thus there is a lot of trust from investors because there's a lot of safety as such. Number two, it avoids fluctuations. So whenever you avoid fluctuations, you're essentially making a promise to investors, and this links back to the first point. Number three, it gives you incentives to keep inflation low. Number four, it avoids depreciation. So whenever there is a depreciation in the value of a currency, it could affect those who are investing in those currencies and those who have bought it, and thus speculative trade, etc., can face a lot of losses, and this is avoided. And lastly, you have current account stability. Now the lack of volatility in the prices ensure that current accounts are stable and are manageable. On the other hand, let us look at some disadvantages of this. It can conflict with macro aims of the government, macroeconomic aims. Obviously, I'm just writing it in short forms. Now this is because you're essentially spending a lot of money to ensure that you're able to peg your currency constantly and ensure that your currency is tied to another currency. And then there's less flexibility to adapt to market changes. Then you have current account imbalance, which is perhaps possible if the economy is facing a tough time. And then you also do have the fact that it may require high interest rates in order to survive. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of a fixed system. Now let us look at the same for a floating system. So for the floating exchange rate system, let us analyze some advantages and some disadvantages. Let's begin with the advantages. The advantages of a floating system would be that it is automatic adjustment of the balance of payments. Number two, there is a lot of flexibility in the economy. Number three, there is low requirement to hold a lot of forex reserves, which could be expensive on the economy, and the money could be spent on other macroeconomic aims. So this essentially ties up straight to our next point. freedom to other macro aims. So you have enough freedom to spend on other macroeconomic objectives of the government. However, the disadvantages are, number one, there's a lot of uncertainty in the economy, and whenever there's uncertainty, there could be a significant impact on the level of investment. And then there's a lot of speculation. Now this links back to the first point. And whenever there's a lot of speculation or depreciation or uncertainty revolving a currency, its investment can decrease and thus impact the economy negatively. There could be risks of inflation, and lastly, investment, as I had mentioned before, links to all of them. Investment could be damaged potentially. So we've looked at the advantages and disadvantages of each of these systems. Perhaps the best recommended system, in my opinion, personally, would be the managed float, because it ensures that you're ensuring that you're benefiting from both advantages of both of the systems while combating the disadvantages of some of them. Now, for the last bit of this chapter, let us just try and understand the causes of exchange rate fluctuation. So some of the key causes that have led to exchange rates fluctuating. Number one is your trade balance. So the export versus import demand and supply completely affect the exchange rates. Number two would be your interest rates in an economy. Number three, you have your speculation. So how there is a lot of public opinion about a particular currency, this could completely affect the exchange rate and perhaps even lead to fluctuations. And then you have your foreign direct investment levels. So the level of foreign direct investment could massively impact the exchange rate of a currency. And then you have economic performance. So your overall economic performance would show to investors whether or not to invest in your economy and thus affect the exchange rates. Number six, you have government intervention. So the level of government intervention and regulation in an economy show the freedom and the ability to grow economically. And last but not the least, you have something called hot money flows. So many of these concepts you just need to have a basic idea, such as hot money flows, but you will explore this in much more depth in A-level economics. So the hot money flows basically refers to a concept which is the movement of money around the world to take advantages of differences in exchange interest rates and exchange rates. So this is when investors move their money from country to country in order to benefit from higher interest rates in other countries. So if your country offers 4%, whereas another country offers 7%, hot money flow would be when you move your money from your country to the other country to benefit from the higher interest rates. So in this video, we have looked at all of exchange rates. I really hope this helped.
Phew, that was like one of the most complicated topics of this whole GCSE Econ spec. If you think I've just simplified it well enough for you to understand it, please make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe to join the Econverse for